Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are on our fantastic planet. And welcome to the second installment in what we're calling the Journey to CEO live stream that we're running in partnership globally with ACCA. So a huge thank you to our partners, ACCA. And for those of you tuned in on various platforms, on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or through direct email connection, a huge thank you for you being part of the session and welcome. So I'm very delighted today because we've got a very special guest, a man called Colin Field, who's the Chief Executive of Saffron Building Society. So I'm going to bring in Colin in a brief moment, but a huge thank you for him for giving up his time. Again, a thank you to ACCA. And really the purpose of this live stream, as we're calling it the Journey to CEO, is to learn about others' career journeys. All of us are on our own respective career journeys. And the purpose of these sessions is to try and unpack as much as possible what we've learned, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between that can help us on our own respective career journeys. So in terms of the listening for today, I would love you to listen to this from a few different perspectives, mainly about what this could do for your organization, also what it could do for your team. And I think most importantly, what we're more focused on here is what this can do for your own career journey as well. My name is Wayne Clark. I'm the CEO of World Class Manager. If you're new to this, then we do this every month, but we do this every quarter live and in association with ACCA. We've worked now with around 250,000 managers in more than 50 countries around the world, and we've learned a lot about people's career journeys. So again, the focus here is what we can all learn that would enrich our career journeys and ultimately make us more valuable too. So without further ado, I'd love to bring in Colin Field here from Saffron Building Society. So good afternoon, Colin. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm very good, Wayne. Thank you for inviting me onto this call today as well. It's really good to be with you.
Oh, a real pleasure. And as we said, this is all part of this journey to try and unpack and in a way explain much of what we've learned individually on our career journeys, which can be of benefit for everybody else. So before we get into some questions, so I've got a few key questions here. I just wanted to cover a little bit of the housekeeping. So I'm going to ask a few questions to Colin as we go through this. Again, mainly this is focused on his career journey. So let's try and learn as much as we possibly can. And then also, as we get towards the end, I'd love you to share some thoughts or some questions. So if you've got a question for me, please feel free to pose it. My name's Wayne. If you've got a question for Colin, please feel free to pose it in the chat box. We've got one of our team live on the line here, so you can field any questions and put them straight through to us. And maybe before we kick off, it'd be great to get a bit of a roll call. So we've got lots of people dialed in. I think we've got more than 300 connected right now watching live. So let us know where you're from. We've got someone here from Malaysia. Well, very good evening to you. Nice and late there. Hong Kong. You guys, this is great. So again, a huge thank you to everyone who's live and dialed in from around the world. So let us know where you're from. Got someone from Poland. Good afternoon. Wonderful, Diana. Thank you very much. We've got someone from Nigeria here. Awesome. So we are a truly global audience. Let's do this. South Africa, live here. So Colin, I'd love you to share with us as a super short, brief intro. What is it that you do? And maybe you can explain a little bit about Saffron Building Society to us as well.
I think I better do. We've got people from all around the globe, so I'll explain what a building society is, because that it'll mean something to people in the UK, but probably doesn't mean anything to a number of people on the call. The best way of thinking about us is we're like a bank, but we're mutually owned, and we are very much focused on our customers, who we call members. So we take in savings, and we look to try and help people with what we call their money happiness in terms of helping them prepare for the future. And also we do mortgage lending. So we spend a lot of our time trying to help people onto the housing ladder and also help people with their dreams in terms of home ownership. So we do both of those things, but we're owned by our customers, which makes us different.
Yeah, very different. And how long have you held the position of chief exec?
It's about 10 years. It's 10 years in September now. So that time has just flown by, quite some time.
And when we think back through, I guess, your career journey, most of the CEOs that we've had the opportunity to interact with, and we've probably met now with more than, 1,000 different CEOs around the world, there tends to be a common theme. Nearly every one of those CEOs didn't set out to become the CEO one day. Some do and have got a very clear ambition. But I'm interested, was your plan to become the CEO one day of the organization or an organization? And then maybe you can sort of give us a bit more of your backstory and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, never been the case. And if I just touch on my backstory, I've been one of those people who really never knew what they wanted to be, even to this point. And I'm thinking as I go through things, there are probably three themes that keep coming out, Wayne. One of which is, if you don't know what you want to be, then focus on what you like and what you're good at. The second one is, you don't know what you don't know, be open to experiences. And the third thing is, you'll get some luck. And then sometimes in life that's very fortunate, and sometimes in life it isn't. But either way, you've got to go and you've got to roll with it. You've got to roll with that luck and make the best of it. So if I just talk about university, there were loads of people at university, for those people who've been to college, who will have known exactly what they wanted to be. That wasn't me. I was one of the people, I did an economics degree at university. I really didn't know what I wanted to be. And the influence of me on that time was actually my dad, who was kind of convincing me, you really need to get a business qualification. You need to keep your doors open. You need to make sure you can, move into other things as you go forward. So what I did there is I was fortunate. I got a place at PricewaterhouseCoopers. It was then called Coops and Lybrand. And at that point, Wayne, it was working in an audit function in the middle of the UK, and I loved my time there. It was great fun. It was a great experience. It gave me great exposure to different businesses and how those businesses worked. But the other thing I learned from that is I really got a passion for seeing the clients I was working with who cared about their businesses, and they cared about the colleagues that they were working with, and that really stood out. And this was really important because most of these businesses at that point, Wayne, for those people who know the Midlands in the UK, I was dealing with heavy industry. I was also dealing with automotive clients, and none of them made any money, or they made so little money, they had no real choices in what to do for the future. So I think at that point I realized a career looking at heavy industry and also looking at automotive, even as an accountant, probably wasn't the route I wanted to take. So, I thought I needed to go and do something else. So I moved out of PwC at that point. But as you can tell, Wayne, it wasn't one of these ideas where I had my career mapped out. It was very much in terms of really hooking into what is it I like doing, what is it I didn't want to do. And certainly I found in PwC, which was full of brilliant people, surrounded by brilliant people, but quite a lot of politics. Yeah. And I wasn't the kind of person who enjoyed that kind of politics, so I decided to make a bit of a change.
So when you go back to the beginning, because one of the statements you said is you got a job working at PwC, or you went into PwC or Coops and Lybrand as it was. For many, I'm sure, who are sort of tuned in right now, and also, we have quite a big undergraduate community that we talk with in our various lectures and stuff like that. I think it feels like an overwhelming idea or thought of how to even get into these companies. So was there anything about your journey into PwC that sort of anyone can learn from, or is there something that you sort of look back and you thought, I wish I would have known this at that point, that would have really helped me to make that more possible?
At that point, not a lot. I think we're going back to the early 90s, and absolutely, you talk to people. I mentioned my father. I talked to my dad about where would be a good place to go. And he'd had exposure to a number of the big accountancy firms, all of whom were excellent. And you talk to people around the university, but the level of resources you've got now, I wish you'd got the level of resources that you have now, Wayne, in terms of the exposure that you can talk to. Not just, you can talk globally. We're talking globally today with various different people. So there's so much more content, so much more knowledge you can build now far more easily. Yeah. It felt like a very different time then.
Yeah, I think it probably is. Well, actually, it definitely is, given all the things that are changing in our insane world at the moment. And I guess one of the amazing tools that we've got is access to something like LinkedIn, where you can really proactively build your network. It's one of the things that we talk to undergrads quite a lot about, with the challenge of try and add as many people as you possibly can. And the great thing is, when you're at the beginning of your career journey, often people are quite inclined to help out or give advice if you ask. And I think asking is probably one of the keys, isn't it?
That's got to be a key thing. Not just LinkedIn, Wayne. Even going back to the 90s, what really stood out to me is people are really keen to share their experience and knowledge.
True.
When I was working at PwC, that was the case. Later on, I moved to Willis Group in London. I spent a lot of time traveling overseas on projects, doing deals with that particular business. And when I started off by saying, when I started my career, there were so many things I didn't know. And when you start realizing just how little you know and how willing people are to share their experiences, knowledge, and their advice, increasingly through my career, you take those opportunities. When you're working on something, if you're working with a client, if you're working in the business and you've got something new coming up, ask questions about it. Really really try and get as much as you possibly can from that. And one of the key things there as well is to just learn how to walk just half a mile in that person's shoes to understand what's important for them, what they're trying to achieve, because it gives you such amazing context. And you mentioned LinkedIn. LinkedIn is amazing. At your fingertips, you can reach out to so many people. You can just pop somebody a question on the messaging there in terms of, I'm thinking about this. Have you seen that? What about this? I want to do this kind of learning. What kind of things have you seen? What experience have you got with? It's just unbelievable just how quickly you can do those type of things now. But similarly, Wayne, just how willing people are to share their knowledge, experience.
I remember one of the first few weeks I joined Deloitte, or Arthur Andersen as it was now, but Deloitte now, in the UK after leaving university. And I remember sitting behind this guy who was on the phone to someone. And I remember I was listening to him, and it sounded like he was turning down their business. And I couldn't quite understand it. I'm this sort of young, hungry grad thinking this is great business. And I asked him afterwards, I said, I wasn't meaning to listen into your call, but it sounded like you were sort of turning them down politely from us acting for them. And I said, well, why would you do that? And he said, well, because they were off strategy. And I didn't understand the concept. I said, well, I don't understand. And he said, well, because we've got a very clear strategy and they didn't fit our strategy. And it was the first time I'd heard the word strategy, of course, before, but having someone explain it like that, it sounds so simple and naive and basic, and it really is, but it was so valuable. And again, I would never have got that insight had I not have asked the question. So I think, you know, interrogating and investigating the network is so important that you've got.
It is. And just that off strategy piece, you know, we can talk about strategy in more detail as we go through this, because it's a word which people think strategy, but it's really understanding what you do, what choices are good for you, who your customers are, and is there a fit, for example, in that case, and where there isn't a good fit. And you can have a client, and that one there, when you were listening in, Wayne, and you were hearing this client thinking, this is a really big client, this is a client that the firm would really love to win, but also taking that step back and think, you know what, we're not the right firm at this point in time to be actually doing that piece of work, and we're not going to be doing it at our best, and it isn't in line with what we're trying to do. And I think one thing experience over a bit of time gives you, or simply getting that experience from others, is the confidence. Confidence is such a key word, to be able to say no politely to people.
Yeah, very much so. And can I ask about customers or members, perhaps, in terms of how you might term it within a building society, about some of the insights? Because I guess in a world where we're so rich with insights, we work quite a lot with every different type of organization, but we're always interested, I guess, by those organizations like hoteliers, retailers, where they're getting reviewed live, real time, all day, every day, aren't they? The customer insight is constant. So I'm just interested in terms of some of your insights about serving the customers, serving the members, and perhaps, are there, given all the trends in the world are changing rapidly, what's changing in what you're seeing there?
I think the key thing with customer, this is going to sound such an obvious thing to say, Wayne. It's a case of, do you really know who your customers are? And it sounds like well, of course we understand who our customers are, or do we understand who our customers want to be? But really understand, what is it? Because the danger is if we internalize it in terms of, well, they're like you and me, and some will be, but many of the people, it's really trying to get that insight in terms of what is it that they really want from you. That's key. And where can you really excel? That's also really, really key. So if I think through, we've got three major customer groups, or two, I'll call it two or three. We've got retail customers, and for them, the reason retail customers come to us is because our service is excellent. It doesn't matter how they do business with us in terms of our service, our attention to detail, the response they'll get from our people will be nearly every single time fantastic. Because I'm lucky to work with people who are passionate about customer service. They want to do the best for the customers, and the customers know that's the case. So they're working through that. Now, we work in financial services. So yes, of course, the price or the interest rate has to be right. People don't do business if that's wrong. But the other bits there is, will we take the time? Do our people care along there as well? And then one thing we've picked up, I'll say recently, it's probably always been there, but really prevalent now. It's got to be, that's not quite enough. That's good, but it's not enough. It's got to be, do they care about the customer? Do they really understand and care about the customer's family? And beyond that now, more and more people looking further in terms of, are you a good business? Do you care about the community? Do you care about the environment? Are you really pulling your weight in there as well? So it's really understanding what those particular needs and wants are from customers, and making sure that you can follow that through. So that's in terms of our retail customers. You mentioned kind of feedback and complaints in a minute. I'll come on to that shortly. In terms of our broker customers as well, one of the things we've learned, so by a broker customer, what I mean by that is, in the UK, most people actually get their mortgage is through a broker. They go to a broker, and the broker tries to place them with the best company to actually fulfill them with their mortgage. What the broker wants is, they want to be able to get hold of somebody on the phone in our team quickly, to help them with what's going on there, to really understand what it is we're looking for. They want to get access to the decision maker. So we make our underwriters, the people who make the decision, open to the brokers, so they actually talk. And if we are going to say no on a deal, they don't want to get strung along. They want to, their time is really precious to them. So it's going to be a no, just make it a quick no. Yeah. And move on from there as well. And on the complaint side, I don't know how you feel about this, Wayne. I hear, oh, you've got a complaint. I'll tell you what, some of the best things we've done are when we've had complaints where people bring things that don't work. And it can be a little thing in terms of, I don't like the way your website works. I don't like the way this works. Or it can be, I didn't feel people were listening to me with, X, Y, and Z, which doesn't happen very often, or the process was poor. It's free consultancy. Yeah. It's people who care, and they've taken the time to bring it to your attention that something isn't working. And then if you can take that, improve it, turn that round as well, it builds trust again with customers in terms of, I hear you, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is how we're going to make it right.
So I think in terms of like the insights for those that are developing their career, and I guess it's irrespective, you could be, 70 years old, still building your career, this is still a valuable insight. I think the extent to which you pose a brilliant question. Do you understand who the customer is? Do you know the customer? I think it's something that you never really get a handle of. It's constant reevaluation and relearning all the time. And kind of just when you think you've got it, you get a fresh insight, which builds a new picture of what the customer wants. And I think to investigate that on a regular basis is essential, isn't it?
It's essential. And the danger is you can easily get complacent in terms of, and people will say, well, we know what the customer wants. And you say, really? Do you?
Yeah. And that can be, when you talk about strategic choices and things you go down, it's also making sure, for example, on strategy you mentioned earlier, someone will say, we need to do this, we need to implement this digital solution. You may well probably do so, and that's the world the way it's going, but you need to take that step back and thinking, is that really what our customers want? Yeah. Our customers, not customers in general, the ones down the road or the ones the other people deal with, but do they want that? Or maybe they want something different. And I think it's really important as people go through their career to critically question what people are assuming to be being given. Yeah. And it's, definitely, I think it's one of the things in particular that the accountancy mindset is really good at. Yeah. It's helping really question and zone in terms of, is this important? Well, interesting. I joined after Deloitte. I went to another accountancy firm. And it was interesting there because at the time they were spending a lot of money every year listening to what the customer or what the client wanted. And the report got given to a group of senior people in the organization. And I think if you are new to the profession or if you're building your career, I think this could be a really valuable tip, I think, based on what I've seen, is that the senior people took a little bit of time to read it and understand it, but not that much. And actually, it never really got past that level. And what happened was there was an overriding narrative in the organization that what our clients really want from us are they want an accountancy firm who really understands their sector and what's going on in their world. And it makes logical sense. Why wouldn't you? Yeah, of course you want to do that. But when you sat and read through, and we read through, it was like a 250-page report. It was very clear that the number one thing that the clients really wanted in terms of what equaled great customer service or client service was speed and responsiveness, which has never been more true today than it's ever been. Yeah. But actually what happened was the organization didn't really put too much attention on the feedback that came back from the clients, and it turned into this story. And at the time, I was responsible for sort of inducting new employees, and I was telling them it's really important that you understand what's going on, from the sector of your client. Actually, I was repeating something which was a myth. The truth was, what people really respected, what would get you the exceptional client feedback scores, was to act quickly. And I think this is one of the things. Nearly every organization out there is awash with customer and client insight data, but there are very few people inside the organization who take their time to really sort of get it into their bones. And I think if you were more junior in the organization, what would make your CEO see you as really valuable? And I think understanding how the customer feels would be a really clever thing to do, and it wouldn't cost any money to do it.
Absolutely. That's a great example. You've got all this information, it's not been used. What a waste. Yeah. And one of the things you mentioned there is it's a key thing as part of how you lead people as well. It's in terms of we have brilliant people at Saffron Building Society in the organisation. We go out of our way to hire great people. We look to train and develop them, and they spend their time talking with customers. So they know what the customers want, and we can augment that. We've got a customer panel. We get information from that, which we can use, and we get feedback from different areas, and we get external feedback as well. So the key thing there is, if you're a chief exec, what do you want? You want your people to be involved in the decision making. You want your people to be involved and really understand the strategy. You know, one of the things I talk to all of our new people when they join on their induction sessions is saying there's a number of things that happen when people join a business. They bring all of the skills and the experience they've had to bear in their life to bear. They will see things in the organization, and you'll have that moment where you're thinking, why are we doing that? That doesn't make any sense. The power of ignorance, you know, use that. And then as they develop their skills and they speak with the customers and they see what works and they don't work, you know, the danger is we've got this thing where you've got to bring that to your leadership. You've got to bring that to your chief exec and say, look, this isn't working. It's not good enough. We need to change it. And I know this because I see it every day. I promise you, one of the most frustrating things for me, Wayne, is well, a couple of things. That when that happens, it's fantastic, and it does. But you still get this, you know, we've worked so hard on our culture, on our values and behaviors for a number of different years now, so we can try and get rid of this hierarchical thinking. So we can have people who are bringing solutions and seeing the problems and bring it to bear. Yeah. But the most painful thing is when something comes up and you'll bring it up thinking, well, this was really poor. And then you get a chorus of, oh, we've always known that, or that's been a problem for some time. And there's this thinking that for some reason, either me or one of my direct colleagues is going to know, and we don't. We all have our role in the organization. And one of the key roles you do as a CEO, my job is really, I could talk about the formalities of it, Wayne, which is obviously setting direction, making sure, you read these in the textbook, making sure we've got the resources to be able to carry it out, ensuring that we're working within risk appetite and also within the governance standards set by ourselves and external, ... And if anyone's still awake at that point, the key thing we need to bear in mind is my job is to help everybody to be the most successful they can be at work. And that's never lost on me every day. It's just that. How can I create the environment to make that happen? And part of that is the environment where people will find something and say, this doesn't work. They'll have the confidence to go and take it to their chief exec and say, look, Colin, this doesn't work. We need to do something with that. And then the chief exec will hopefully have the common sense, humility, and good behavior to welcome it.
Yeah. So I'm interested in this. And so in terms of your journey of leading and managing people then, because I guess this came, obviously this has evolved over time as you've become more senior and you've gone into different organizations and now obviously within Saffron. But it's a huge question, this, but in terms of your key learnings of looking at leading and managing people, which I'm sure is constantly evolving and talking about building a culture, what are some of your, I guess, reflections at this point in your journey?
Yeah. I think it's building, one of the things I just said there, it's about, you've got to keep remembering, it's your job to help the business be successful. You've got your goals that you're trying to achieve, but you're not going to do that on your own. You know, you're going to do that by the people and the processes and things you bring to bear with that. So, you know, I'm thinking about what do I need my people to understand? What do I want my colleagues to understand? It's about what we're doing, why we're doing it, why will we be successful if we're doing it, and what's in it for them. So that's probably the key thing. There's probably three learnings in there. First of all, you've got to involve your colleagues on the journey as you're going through there, because, you know, and this is very much with the UK context. I know in different territories there's a little bit of a different construct with this, but in the UK, people do not want to be told, is my learning. The power of tell is one you've got to use very, very sparingly. What they want to do is they want to feel part of it. And if they feel part of it, they feel invested, and they'll own it, and they'll work harder to make it happen. And candidly, in many cases, your people have got better experiences to make those decisions than you do. So it's just making sure, how do we get the right people in the right place at the right time? Then it's communication. I know communication is a massive topic in its own right, but it's the right communication at the right time. And I'm going to add on that, for the right amount of time. And if I could share a story, Wayne, with this one here, because I learned this at the side of a rugby pitch many years ago while I was watching my son play rugby. And next to me on the pitch was a gentleman called Richard Cockrell, many people on the call will not know who Richard Cockrell is. But if I tell you, he was an ex-England rugby player, ex-Leicester Tigers coach, and he was an England coach as well. And at that time, he was the director of rugby at Leicester Tigers, which is one of the largest rugby teams in England, certainly. So I was talking to Richard, and I said to him, Richard, what do you say to the team before they run on the pitch and in the run up to the game? And he said, well, in the run up to the game, very simple messages. And I said, when you get to the game, maybe one. And if you're lucky, half of them will remember it.
Wow.
And what it told to me was, it was just make sure you're really clear in terms of what you're doing. But for the right amount of time, it doesn't mean you need to be pithy or sound bites. You've just got to think about, if you're trying to convey something with more detail, you've also got to be prepared to invest the time in doing it with people. Because as much as you're explaining it, they have to assimilate it over that period of time, and assimilate it, and then probably feedback and challenge it as well.
Yeah.
So it's being very, very careful with that. It doesn't mean dumbing things down. It's just making sure that you're being really clear, because I think one of the dangers when you're a chief exec is if you share half a message, or you share a message which could be misconstrued.
Yeah.
It's got to be very clear in terms of, has that actually really been understood? You know, the point somebody goes, I get it. And then if you're really getting it right, you'll have somebody maybe hopefully challenging you on it as well to understand a bit more. And then the third thing in terms of leadership, which is something I've learned, probably more recently, Wayne, is you have to match up to the contract that you've made with your colleagues, that you probably haven't realized you've made when you've employed them. You know,
Oh, Colin? See, if you wanted evidence, this is live. Here it is. Hold on. We're just double checking with Colin. Colin, can you hear me? Okay, maybe we can give Colin a chance. Colin, if you can hear me, maybe you can log out and log back in. I think one of the things that Colin was talking about, I think which is so true just now, is if you missed his last point, was about how you, in a way, match up to the contract that's been set. And I think this is a huge issue for so many organizations, both in terms of mis-selling of the employment experience. Right? So this is a big problem that we constantly see, where people are promised the world by the organization. If you look at most organizations' websites, they promise that, you know, you're going to get this, you're going to get that. The experience can often not match up to that. So I think that's huge from the organization's point of view. But I think everyone builds a picture in their mind, certainly I did when I joined a company, of what I expect of the CEO. My first ever meeting that I got to see our CEO when I joined Deloitte at the time, I was explaining this to someone the other day, was fascinating because the CEO, all I can remember was seeing the CEO's tie, what shoes he wore, the way he communicated. And it was fascinating because I'm not listening to a word he's saying, I'm observing how he's behaving. And there was something quite interesting in that. And then thinking through what I expected of that CEO. If you fast forward through to where we are in April 2025, our expectations of a great CEO, as I think Colin was alluding to, everything from being chief culture officer to, you know, chief strategy officer to chief talent leader in the organization. We've got a lot of expectations on the role of the CEO. So I think it's important for CEOs to try and match up for that. One of the things that we do actually in our final module of World Class Manager, if you're familiar with our program, is we talk about the 12, or actually we map out 10 different expectations of the role of a great CEO. So we talk about being a CEO, being a CFO, being a chief marketing officer. And when you think through each one of those key roles, is again, you're developing in terms of your career, it is quite interesting because you start to think through what some of those key disciplines might mean. What I mean is, if you put on the CFO hat for a minute and thought about, okay, now we understand the finances of the organization, is there something that I should do as a manager that might help explain the finances of the organization in a different way, which will come back to that. If you put on the hat of the chief marketing officer, would it mean that you interact with social media in a different way? Probably would do. Most organizations, I'm going to put this out there, most organizations, if you look at the way that they corporately manage their communications from a social media point of view, is usually not very good. The engagement's quite low on social media. The quality of the messaging isn't very good either, if truth be told, if you look at many organizations. And I think most managers inside the organization have got a very strong view on what they should perhaps do to make that better. If you were to put on the, I don't know, the chief commercial officer's hat for a moment, might that change the way you look at doing deals, contractual obligations, look at challenging key stakeholders and so on? So I think when we start to think of all of these roles that are often expected to be played by the CEO, we call this being a really strategic thinker, not about coming up with complex strategy plans, more about thinking of all of those those different perspectives of what a great CEO would be like. The reason why we think this is really interesting is because when you think through in terms of your career development, what could you do that would build you to be and to be seen as being the most valuable as possible inside your organization? So the reason why we look at what we call being a strategic leader as a key element of our program is we think this really helps to build your skill set in the organization too. And if I could touch upon a couple of others just to see before Colin comes back in. One of the big things, I'm sure none of you are sitting there looking at your time in your diary, thinking to yourself, there is not, you've got lots of empty space. So we know that optimizing time as a CEO is a really important thing as well. So I think Colin's back with us. Let's add Colin back to the stage. Colin, this was a great example of the fact that this is live. If anyone was doubting this, this was a great example. So thank you very much. And I think where we left you, where you dropped out, was you were talking about you must match up to the expectations placed on being a CEO. And I was just sort of alluding to that and sharing some of the insights from our program on this.
Yeah, it's this thing when you've got this contract with people, you've brought them in the business, and the contract is they're coming in and they're going to deliver and help you deliver the goals. You know, what you have to live up to is they're coming for a period of time and you're helping them with their career for a period of time. And you need to make sure you can do that as well. So the fit of doing that is just so important. And if you can really match that well with people who've joined your business, you know, probably, let's be honest, Wayne, not for life nowadays. Quite often it's for a more limited period of time, you know, maybe for 3-4 years. It's making sure you can live up to that.
Yeah, much so. And then in terms of them, when you think through, I guess, the next phase, and when you think of your journey and also the business's journey, when you think of the thing called the strategy, and you mentioned it earlier, it's one of those words that often I used to think was really confusing and complex. The more that I've understood and learned from seeing organizations we've seen in action, that actually strategy is unbelievably straightforward. And someone explained it to me when I joined at Deloitte, which I thought was a great way. I think, yeah, we're there. Yeah, one of the senior guys at Deloitte explained it to me in a way which I never forgot and I really loved. So he said, so right now I'm sitting, the office I'm in is near the BBC in central London. So he said to me, imagine that your goal is to go from where you are in central London right now to, let's say, the Canary Wharf, which is in the east part of London, if you're not familiar with London. Your goal is to get there. Your strategy is, are you going to decide to take the number 28 bus? Are you going to take the Metropolitan line? You know, however you're going to plan to get there, that's the strategy. You've got a goal, which is to get to where you're going, and your strategy is simply how you're going to get there. And I thought that was such a great way to explain it, which made so much sense to me. But I think strategy is often made to be quite or overly complex, often for the reason of people like to hide behind stuff. But I think it's often that straightforward. So I'd love to get some of your insights in terms of, how do you set and build strategy? Because I think that would be really interesting for us. And then, again, some of your reflections on being a more strategic leader.
Yeah, I think, as you say, strategy is such a fat word, isn't it? If I can say that. Because there are so many paths you can go and choose. It's absolutely vital as well for the business. It's also vital if you're a chief exec, because certainly if your strategy goes wrong, then as a chief exec, your lifetime is going to be quite small. And in fact, you know, with people on the call here who are, you know, basically trained or are accountants as well, the skill set's really, really good to help with, you know, what's the size of the market, what's the size of the opportunity, what investment needs to be made, how's it going to be paid back, what are the constraints, all of these good things as well. The approach I've always found that's really useful. But the thing about, you can have a great strategy in terms of we need to do this, but it may not be the right one for your customers. It certainly may be the area where actually you may not even be able to deliver it. So a key thing, Wayne, is be able to, as a chief exec, just to take that step back so you can keep asking the question, actually, does this really fit the business? Is that the key thing that we need to go and do here? Does it fit our culture even? Because you can look at the numbers, but when you take that step back and think, actually, is that really who we are? Is that really what our customers want? And is that something I'm going to be able to get all 200 of my colleagues on board with, and get them excited about it, enthused about it? And the problem can be, you can come to this conclusion that this choice here is absolutely the best choice if we could land it. But actually, it's very, very unlikely that we will be able to land it. You know, it's a great strategy for somebody else. And I think over the years, my learning has been actually it's strategy is vital. I think sometimes a little bit more overlooked is execution, in terms of actually how are you going to do it over that period of time as well. And some of that can be, you know, very hard things that, if I can dare I say it, being one myself, accountants are very good at. And some of it can be really, I'll call it soft things, but the soft things are the most important. It's around the heart of the business, the culture, and how things fit.
Yeah. Well, there's the late great Jim Rohn in the US used to say that the things that will make you successful are usually quite easy to do, and it's just the fact that you just don't do them. So, and as he says, things that will make you successful are easy to do, but the problem with things that are easy to do is that they're also really easy not to do. So the action is the key. And I think when we spoke last time, you were talking about this knowing-doing gap. Is that correct? Or have I lost you? Colin? Okay. Well, apologies here. This is the pitfalls of a live broadcast, but there we go. One of the things that we were talking about very briefly then, if you just lost Colin, as I have, Colin, was about this book called the Knowing-Doing Gap, which is an interesting thing to check out. When I joined Deloitte many years ago, I was given this book by my boss, and I found it fascinating. And actually, it talks about this challenge of it's never the lack of knowledge, it's the lack of doing. And one of the things that we often look at is, often to make yourself successful, this is about just doing and acting on the things that you know will make you successful. And often those are really straightforward and simple to do. Interestingly, in most organizations we come across, and if I could share some data with you, we find out that about 10 to 15% of most populations will be willing to do what's necessary in order to be successful. So I'm just checking, Colin, can you hear us?
I can hear you. We're not having the best of
perfect.
luck, I'm afraid, with the...
No, not at all. So it's one of the big things we talk about. And Colin, one of the things I mentioned just before, I think we lost you then, was about this knowing-doing gap. And I think you mentioned that you'd seen this before, or you'd read a book on this before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a professor at London Business School, Costas Markides. He talks about the knowing-doing gap. And it's so true in that, we talked earlier about the insight you can get from your colleagues, from your customers, all around you, it's all there. And what he would say was, well, you know what it is you need to do. You just need to do it. The problem is it's the execution again. The strategy for you is really quite clear. And the premise of that is they've invited a top university business professor in to tell them what their strategy should be. And quite often the answer was already there. You knew what the issue was. You just need to go and do it.
Yeah. And
that's the challenge, I think, with many businesses in terms of and it comes down to this strategy thing can be seen as being, so highfalutin as opposed to it can really be simple choices done well.
Yeah.
And that can help you win.
Hugely. And I think, with our modern day distractions, not to say I'm an older guy, I'm 48 years old, grey's here, 49 soon. But one of the modern distractions is, without a doubt, love it or hate it, it's social media. And it's so easy to spend 2-3 hours of your day, absolute doom scrolling, useless of wastage of time. And that time could be better spent, not procrastinating, getting focused on the things that we want to do. So I think when we look at how do you best utilize time? Interestingly, it's probably the most utilized area of the World Class Manager program. We call it optimizing time, because this is all about how do you make sure that you get the best usage of time possible. And of course, we want to try and make sure that's as effective as we can possibly make it. So I'm conscious of time, and I'm conscious that I would love to get into some questions. Hopefully, hearing Colin's journey, learning about his journey from originating at first sort of working role into PwC, then through to being the chief exec now for the last 10 years of Saffron Building Society, if you've recently joined the call. We'd love to put some questions either to Colin or to myself. We'd love to answer those. So please feel free to share in your respective chat function any questions that you may have. We've got one of our team here in the UK live on the line who's also going to pick up some of these, and we'll read them the same time that you do. So I guess we'll let Colin take this, being an accountant. Colin, are you with us?
Oh, no, this didn't work.
Okay, so what should an accountant do and think differently to move beyond being number-orientated and risk-averse in order to step up and become a CEO? Well, I'll take that question in the absence of Colin. I think this is an important one to focus on, right? And this, for me, as a non-accountant, management consultant by background, is all about building relationships. And you'd probably argue I would say that, biased around being a management consultant. But I think the skill of which you can or the skill to which you can build really effective relationships with as many people as possible. And when we talk about effective relationships, it's not about being able to sell something. It's more about being able to truly and empathically understand where they're coming from, which is probably one of the most important elements of building an effective relationship. As an advisor to anybody, whether that's financial, whether that's management consultative, whatever that might be, having a connection with someone where they feel like they're going to get value from their interaction with you is probably one of the most important things to do. So we think that building an effective relationship or building effective relationships is probably one of the most powerful and proactive things that you can do to build your career and ultimately become the CEO. Colin, are you with us?
I am. I'm so sorry, everyone.
No, it's fine. It's a fluid chat. We like it. It's keeping us on our toes. So in terms of this question, Colin, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, being that you're the only accountant in the room here.
Yeah. I think one of the key things actually as an accountant is to, at that point in time, just think through, it's more than the numbers. It's always thinking about, do I really understand this business? Do I understand actually what the business is trying to achieve? Can I understand actually where my colleagues are on these type of things as well? Because if you can start thinking that way in terms of process and what the business is trying to achieve, then I think you move beyond being completely number oriented. And what I mean by that is, ultimately it's all of the business processes which lead to the numbers. So I think it's making sure that you're spending enough time understanding that. And that involves the things we've talked about. For example, talk to your colleagues, talk to mentors if you've got them to kind of help you with this, and walk that mile in someone else's shoes. So whether that be the operations director, it could be an operational manager, it could be someone on the sales floor, it could be somebody in marketing, really understands what makes it tick. And I think that gives you the breadth of seeing a situation. And then what you'll see is, and I've seen this a number of times in my career, when I was working in finance and beyond, is if you can understand what you're juggling with in terms of the breadth of any decision, in terms of where the risk is, where the opportunity is, what's in it for other people as well, then you're starting to think like a chief exec in terms of actually how do you balance those things off. So but the key thing to do is start it now. So while you're working through your accountancy, to be a brilliant accountant, you need to be able to do that as well. And that will really hold you in good stead for the future.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That's a fantastic. We've got another long question here. This is wonderful. So if you've been comfortable as number 2 for years, deputy, regardless of the sector organisation you've worked in, what would they need to change in their approach and thinking that can help them to make the shift to number 1, i.e. CEO?
Well, for some people, possibly nothing, to be honest. I think the key thing, whenever you step up into a new role, I think we've all been there, you get this, for many people, me certainly, you get this imposter feeling in terms of what do I do here? And there's a bit where you really have to spend a lot of time and effort investing to be able to get up to speed with that particular role. But then it's around thinking ahead. When I talked about the stuff that you don't know, that's the time to start learning the things that you don't know, to really understand. And if you've got, for example, a really good a chief exec who you report to, and you can build that relationship, it's talking with them. Can you network and talk with other chief execs around the place? Are there people in your network you could use just to get that different perspective? But certainly, if you've got a really good relationship with your chief exec, you should be having those conversations with her or him to talk through actually, what are you thinking about now? What are you worried about now? What's your decision-making process? Why is it that you wanted to do that rather than that? And I think in doing that, that will actually give you a breadth of approach that you can take, and you can think, right, it's one of these now. And I think it's also important, if you are a chief exec, to actually explain that thinking process to people as well, about why you're coming to that conclusion. Because ultimately, what you're trying to do is bring people up. So ultimately, hopefully, they can take your role. And that's what they certainly should be trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good. Thank you so much, Colin. Another question from Diana. Thank you so much. What is your advice for cooperation of CEO with the owner of the company, especially if you disagree with the owner regarding some of the decisions and when the owner permanently micromanages and often takes the decision instead of you? What a genius question. Thank you so much, Diana. Colin, what do you think?
That's a really tough one. Just when you want your internet connection to go down, you get that question. It's really tough. One of the things, speaking candidly, as a chief exec, the buck does stop with you with regard to that. And I work in a regulated industry as well. So the regulator will absolutely hold me to account for anything this business does. So in my mind, it's really clear. You've got to be clear when you've got, whether it be an owner or whether it be a chairman or whether it be whoever else, a founder, who does what, who's responsible for what. And ultimately, Dan, it's really difficult. If there's a battle going on where you've got somebody who's trying to do your job for you, that probably isn't a situation that's going to end particularly well, unless you can resolve it, either through, probably, hopefully through negotiation in terms of what those roles and responsibilities are. But you absolutely, when you're the chief exec and you're accountable for the running of the organisation, you can't have other people taking that off you. You are the person who will be held accountable for it ultimately.
Yeah. And to what extent, Colin, just a follow-on question to Diana's one here, to what extent does having sort of being on the same page strategically help with that? Because I guess there can often be different views of what the goal was.
Yeah, so important that you build that relationship and you understand what the goals are going in.
Yeah.
In terms of, for example, my chair joined the organisation in August of last year. We spent a lot of time talking about the business, how we were going to work together, what the goals were, all of these type of things. So we knew that we were going to be working together, with various different things. And it's really important as well that each of those individuals knows their role. Now, it's different when you've got an owner.
Yeah.
An owner, founder, owner, investor who's driving things ultimately. They will be calling the shots and they will be very much saying, look, I want you to go and deliver X, Y, and Z. And that's the contract you took, basically, if that is the case. But you've got to be able to be left to get on with it.
Yeah,
so that's the key thing. Otherwise, it gets really, really difficult.
Yeah. And if you are listening to this, if you're not watching, we've got a question here from Amar who says, why don't we see a lot of accountants becoming CEOs of non-accounting businesses? What is it that lacks in us? I don't know if that, my experience certainly from the UK is we do see a lot of accountants who do make it into chief exec roles. Often, CFOs would be the traditional next step up for the CEO in many organizations here. But I get that differs all around the world. But Colin, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't see it. It's a good question, Amar. I don't see things lacking. I think it's broadly, I think if you take aside accountants or take that CFO route, often when you're considering the next tier down in terms of the capability to actually step up to the chief exec role, you'll start talking about breadth. Can they see a problem with breadth? Can they understand what the issues are? Can they master, particularly with accountants, I'll come to that, but on the soft skills? Are they people focused? And my experience is a lot of accountants really are all of those things. They can do all of those things. So I think it's if you can see along your career trajectory that actually I want to go more into a general management point of view, it's making sure you're picking up the skills and experience where you'll be able to demonstrate that along the way. You need to be saying, because it's a constant jibe, it's a jibe that gets thrown in terms of you're talking like an accountant. And let's be honest about that. It's a fantastic training. To a degree, you will always talk like an accountant. It's the reason you are where you are. But you've got to be able to demonstrate that breadth of skill set where you can say, no, I'm far more than that. Yeah. And I can understand where my CIO is. I can understand where my ops director is. And then another piece probably to watch out for as well is we talked about micromanaging before and not stepping on people's toes. You've just got to make sure that you're letting people do their job. They don't need you doing their job for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a follow-on question again from Amar, thank you so much, is, Colin, as a CEO, how does objective setting take place in your organisation, and how do you ensure performance management of different layers of teams?
Yeah, we do and we've done it this way for a long, long time now. It's a very clear cascade in terms of, so we have the organisation's objective, and then there's a cascade down, or like a pyramid, in terms of actually how does that translate to everyone's objective across the organisation. So they're really clear. And the benefit of doing that is when we talked earlier about, are people clear about what's expected of them and how they're helping the business to win? Yes, they are, because their objectives are absolutely cascaded from the ones that I have as chief exec of the business. And even better than that, when we go into that strategic planning, where we start turning those strategic goals into what we do, we also make sure that we engage with a number of managers in the business as well to make sure that they've actually got the buy-in to it as well. So if you can get those two things right, or make the journey to get them right, because we're always trying to refine it, then I've always found that the most effective way of doing things.
Yeah, brilliant. And thank you so much, Amar. Brilliant questions. I think we've got time for one more. We'll make this the last question. As a CEO, Colin, do you have a hero leader, fictional or real, that has a particular trait you admire and copy? Mine is Crocodile Dundee. He talks to everyone and treats everyone he meets with complete clarity and learns so much through that attitude. Brilliant. That's from Moira King. Thank you very much, Moira. Colin, any hero leaders?
That's a great question. I really can't think of one offhand, but I'll do a cop-out answer for you, Wayne, in terms of I try and borrow a little bit from many people. Yeah. So, you always got to be yourself. But when you see other people who are really good at doing things, you think, I can incorporate that. So, for example, I worked with a brilliant leader called Paul Cook when I was at Barclays. And what he taught me was he took time. He would explain to me, and I was far more junior at that point. He would explain to me, this is what we're doing, why we're doing this. and he would explain his vulnerability about the situation. I'm nervous about, we're going to be asked about this. This is where we're going to get challenged.
Yeah.
Didn't need to do it. Wasn't going to make his career any better. But that was a key thing for me. And I was blessed with a few people like that along the way who would just take the time, they'd explain and not just say what they're doing it, but why they're doing it. Had another boss also when I was at Barclays, a man called Philip McHugh, brilliant. He was best CFO probably I worked for. I hope there aren't other CFOs on the call who I worked for, but he wasn't an accountant.
Yeah.
But he really knew what he was good at and what other people were good at. And that taught me about delegation and really understanding how you match things with that, because I could see the way that he was doing it. And there were other people along the way as well. So sorry, a bit of a cop-out.
No, it's a great answer, because I think, there are mentors in all shapes and sizes of people. There was a guy who I used to talk to who ran our local dry cleaning business. Nothing to do with my world at all, but just such a knowledgeable and logical genius. I used to get advice from him on my business every now and again. I think he was fascinating. Really clever thinker. You'd sort of pose a question to him. He's like talking to a chat GPT of the laundry world. It's quite remarkable. But I think there's genius everywhere, right? Which you can tap into if you look for it.
And it's there, and you look at things. And one of the other things in there is you learn so much from people like that. And equally, you learn so much from the people who are really bad managers and bad leaders.
True.
Because that will demonstrate to you what doesn't work.
Yeah, massively.
And if you can borrow a few of those things and make yourself the best version of you, then that's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, we're going to keep to time and wrap it up there, Colin. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for A, sharing your insights, and B, showing what leadership is like when you battle technology. And you won, Colin. You won today.
I'm sorry, it was a bit stop-start, so apologies, Wayne. I know
Colin versus tech. Colin won today. That's the headline.
Okay.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. And again, if you are late or you joined partway through the stream, Colin talks a lot about his career journey, what he's learned from many of the organizations and leaders he's come across, his reflections on great leadership, great management, customer insights, and also this important challenge of how do you set strategy properly as well. So again, a huge thank you, Colin. You'll be able to see all of this on the catch up or the on-demand version if you tuned in late into the stream. So a huge thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to sharing more insights with you over the next couple of weeks, because we're going to be announcing another very special guest for our July live stream. So stay tuned for who that's going to be. But again, huge thank you, Colin. Huge thank you to everyone at ACCA, especially Sharon Waite, who does a great job in making sure that we can advertise this to the whole network, and to also Helen Brand, the CEO, who actually, if you don't follow Helen Brand on social media, I thought I'd do a pretty good job with Air Miles, but Helen Brand outclasses everyone I know. She's in more places globally than anyone I've ever seen. So if you've not followed Helen Brand, the CEO of ACCA, please do follow her. She's remarkable and also does a great ambassador job for the profession, I think. So huge thank you to them. Huge thank you again to you, Colin, and look forward to seeing you live on the next live stream in July. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wayne. Thanks, everybody.